Hello, everybody. It's Dave Neal, stand-up comic and host of the Rush Hour podcast, with some breaking news coverage of the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni court case. We, of course, are not in trial yet, but today was a very, very big day in New York State regarding this trial that is possibly going to be expedited. That's right. It's supposed to be March of 2026, but the judge is making comments that he wants to get this thing nipped in the bud right away. He's kind of like the dad who looks in the rearview mirror and says, "Knock it off. I'll pull this car over." The judge isn't having it, and seems like a pretty good judge so far. Justin Baldoni's lawyer actually is the only legal representative of either party that we know of right now that has spoken to the press. I'm going to share right here what Justin's lawyer had to say. They are very optimistic about what's going down. It doesn't appear as though there is a gag order in place. It's one of those things, the fact that the judge wants to speed this up so that the public doesn't run with misinformation, I think is the mutual ground that the judge wants to offer, to say, look, we're not going to do a gag order because that's a very, very dangerous place to be, these gag orders. You know, it's obviously in violation of First Amendment, and you might disagree with that. I'm no expert in the First Amendment, but again, you should be able to state your case if the public has a case that they believe, like in this instance, the New York Times runs with Blake Lively's article. Justin Baldoni should be able to share his response publicly, even if this is going to trial. So what? He's going to have to wait a year and a half, sit on his hands while people rewrite his story? I think it's okay to share his side. I think Blake should be able to share her side. All the better for the rest of us. So we're going to get into this right now. I covered this story an hour and a half ago. Judge denies Blake's deposition. So the judge is not going to let Brian Friedman, Justin Baldoni's attorney, depose Blake Lively yet. The judge basically said, let's wait till we have all of the, people that are going to be involved. And once we have that, we'll get on that. So, getting all the, I don't know if that means getting all of the submissions done for the different documents they need and whatnot. So Baldoni's lawyer, Brian Friedman, said, we need to move forward. We still have livelihoods. I can work as early as today to know if the new parties can be represented by us. We don't want delay. The judge said, you'll get document requests. I'm not going to allow depositions now. But more importantly, are they going to have the gag order, the protective order? It doesn't appear so. By the way, shout out to a fan of ours for giving this very interesting artwork. It is Taylor Swift on a dragon, and then it is Khaleesi as Deadpool. Grab your friends, wear your florals. And then it's the green guy, Jealous Pool. And then it's another dragon, Ryan Reynolds. So, and I guess this Khaleesi is supposed to be Blake Lively. But either way, great work there in the Photoshop world by an audience member. So let's get into what Brian Friedman said. We're going to have a lot of updates. But first, here is Justin Baldoni's attorney speaking to the press immediately following their day in court. Let's go back here. This was shared on Law and Crime. Have a listen to this.
Respect Judge Lyman, and we're really looking forward to moving the case along as quickly as possible. Our clients are devastated and want to move the case along as quickly as possible. And we just couldn't be more pleased with how the case was handled today, how it was managed, and we're going to move as quickly as we possibly can and prove our innocence in a world where sometimes people judge you before they give you a chance. And we're going to change that. Thank you.
And then as he walks away, some reporters ask questions. A quick and brief statement. He says, couldn't be more pleased. Now, you might say, well, lawyers always want to make it seem in the public opinion like they're winning or whatnot. But let's go to Inner City Press here on Twitter. They've been covering this with live tweets. They have a donation button on their page. So please, if you have the extra funds, consider donating to these reporters who are there doing the work of the citizens. Vlog number 2 of February 3rd, after Blake Lively v. Justin Baldoni hearing, at which pre-trial statements were criticized and seemingly shut down. Inner City Press, not a fan of gag orders. Have a listen to this.
Okay, here we are, Matthew Russell Lee, Inner City Press, here at the Southern District of New York. We've just covered the hearing in Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni. Much of the discussion was about, quote, gag orders, about what can and can't be said outside of the court. Now, Blake Lively's lawyers and related parties have all been sort of fronting out here outside the court, but they didn't speak on the microphone. I will say that Mr. Brian Friedman of Justin Baldoni did speak on the mic, although he also agreed to consent to the local rules about extrajudicial statements. Who knows? Judge Lyman said it's going to give rise to satellite litigation about the conduct of lawyers. We're generally against gag orders, and that's one of the reasons we're interested in this case. And, of course, we've covered other cases. We've covered Eric Adams, Diddy. We covered Rudy Giuliani. But we're going to cover this one, too, maybe in a book. Let's see. You never know. Covering a lot of things here. Inner City Press. To begin.
There it is, Inner City Press. Again, great work by them all day long. I want to highlight some things that they said. Here's a video that the Inner City Press took after Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni hearing. And again, I don't think there's any audio here.
But they didn't speak.
Oh, here we go. So this is Blake Lively's lawyers. They canoodled outside, but they did not speak with reporters. There they are walking away. No comments.
What can we say? The hearing was held, but they didn't speak. People set up a bunch of microphones, many cameras, but...
In that case, my guess is, and if there's any lawyers in the audience, you could let me know, not speaking means you do not have a coordinated response to what just went down in there. Maybe that's because they didn't get the gag order request, the protective order. Maybe it's because the judge struck down the idea of Brian Friedman not deposing Blake Lively. So that doesn't mean Brian Friedman will end up deposing Blake Lively. They might have a shark. They might have a Camille Vasquez type vixen. I don't mean to be sexist and call it vixen, but you understand what I'm saying. A somebody that might trigger Blake Lively in a way that could rile up her answers. Look, Blake Lively's she's a woman, she's a human, she's a mom. I always say people are trying the best with the information they have, and people are going to roast me on that and saying, oh, what are you talking about? How could you? Listen, I stand by that in most cases. I don't know what's going through Blake's head. I don't know what evidence they might have that they haven't shared yet, but I think it's no surprise that the majority of people are on the Baldoni side of things. We'll try our best to see that, speak to that, but also play devil's advocate where we can. I think that's important. Play devil's advocate where you can. So here's what Inner City Press reported. Blake Lively's lawyer, Gottlieb, said their statements are being amplified on social media, that being Justin Baldoni's. It's very hard to unring the bell. How rich? How rich? You know what bell is hard to unring? The New York Times. It's almost as if Blake, hit the red button, and started a warfare that did not intend to have Justin Baldoni respond. What's that saying? If you're going to go for the king, you better take him out. What's it? You know what I mean? And in this case, Justin Baldoni's not the king here, but if you're going to end someone's career, you better do it. And Justin Baldoni fighting back in a way where he is fighting for his career. He's fighting for his reputation. I mean, what more could you really have to fight for than your character? So the judge says, give me one or two examples of them amplifying things on social media. And then Gottlieb for Blake Lively says, on January 7th, Mr. Friedman said, we are releasing the statements to show an attempt to take over the movie. Lively's lawyer on his client's show, Megyn Kelly, he said evidence is being planted. He said Blake Lively was no victim. She used allegations of sexual harassment to try to become the director of the movie. The judge said, isn't that his complaint? Oh no. Lively's lawyer said, you're not supposed to launch attacks on the character of your adversary. He is making representations about discovery material. We don't have an opportunity to rebut it. He took a video clip and released it, then commented on it. Baldoni's lawyer, Friedman, said for months before any filing was made in this case, the New York Times, giving 12 hours notice, put out an article that completely devastated. The judge then responded, you don't have enough evidence that Mr. Gottlieb was behind that. Friedman said they used the press. Baldoni's Friedman said on January 2nd, they said nothing changes anything about Miss Lively's claim. We encourage people to read her complaint. Judge said, you could have said that, review our pleadings, but you went further. Friedman said, they said sexual harassment is illegal. Baldoni's Friedman said, my client suffered hundreds of millions of dollars in damages. We're willing to stipulate to the local rules. The judge said, I will adopt the rule with some reluctance. Still, I don't want satellite litigation about statements of the lawyers. So I guess what that means is he doesn't want satellite litigation. Like he doesn't want again, and I don't know, this is just my opinion, but he doesn't want them to be bouncing off, doing all the press tours back and forth, sharing this publicly. The judge then said, if it turns out this ends up being litigated in the press, I may accelerate the date of the trial. Unless this case is settled, a jury will speak. Baldoni's Friedman said, damage is done before a jury speaks. Judge Lyman said, I get it. This is pretty wild stuff. So even though the judge is kind of pushing back a little bit, he seems to understand what's going on here. The judge says adjourned, and there it is. Again, here's the Patreon and all of the information if anyone wants to donate to Inner City Press. We like to support journalists, of course, content creators that we kind of, share and all of that. So it's very fascinating what's going on. I'm sure the judge is being, I'm sure he's a good judge. There's been questions about, well, his brother worked with Blake Lively back in the way. It seems as though the tactic being used by Justin Baldoni's attorney, Brian Friedman, is to compliment the judge and say, hey, we think he's doing a good job here. And that's probably because they got some of the calls. To use another baseball analogy, you ever have a game where you're like, man, that umpire was amazing. Well, it's because they called a few extra strikes for you. It's like you tend to think people are good at what they do if they're on your side. They got it. They're really great at their job. They've got great taste, and they're good at making decisions. It's like, yeah, that's because they sided with you. And of course, we all believe we're the best thing out there. So it's interesting. There was one more clip I wanted to share from our pal, not actually Golden. We seem to have one of her clips every day to share. And she discussed the draft statement that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds made that they wanted Justin Baldoni to read, and why this statement would have been very bad for Justin Baldoni if he had actually given it. Have a listen.
So number one is, even if he had given this statement, she would still have had the right to sue him for sexual harassment, right? Like, a handshake deal that, like, if you give this statement, I won't go after you, is probably not enforceable. So, he really was in a lose-lose situation. If he gave the statement, frankly, it might have been easier for her to go after him for sexual harassment, because it's like, oh, remember that statement he gave? This is what it really meant. So I just don't see any reason why he would have done this at the time, because she still could have done all of the things that she did, whether he made that statement or not. Number two, I want the metadata for this document. I want to know who originated it, when they originated it, how many people saw it, how many versions were there, when did it change, was it sent to people, did they make changes, what were those changes? I want to know all of those things.
I love
Hopefully they'll get it in the litigation.
Yeah, this statement's going to be important along with all these other ones. Here's a final theory I'll share with you from TikTok that's just fascinating. And we are going to have more coverage on the Rush Hour podcast, which is coming immediately after this, so make sure you're subscribed. This is pop.diaries360. This is actually from a few weeks ago, but it's interesting. It just crossed my lap. If Blake fell in love with her co-stars on Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and Penn Badgley on Gossip Girl, and Leo DiCaprio on Great Gatsby, and Ryan Reynolds on Green Lantern, is it possible Blake caught feelings for Justin? Gosh, who knows? Anything's possible. So there it is. Very interesting stuff. Speaking of catching feelings, if you haven't already, check out my weekend episode of the Rush Hour podcast. I covered the different styles of attachment, avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, and it's very interesting to begin to look at if there was a possible attachment style being played here. Our cell phones almost inflame attachment styles. I'm actually going to be sharing this on my Instagram, this Instagram reel. So if you haven't already, follow me on Instagram, dneals, DNEALZ. But there are different attachment issues that we have from our upbringing. Did we get too much love, not enough love? What does it do to us? And cell phones increase attachment issues because it's that neediness of needing a response back. And the fact that Blake and Justin are texting late at night in all hours throughout the day, talking about the project, it does kind of feel like it's boyfriend-girlfriend style, at least on her end. If Justin Baldoni's telling Blake Lively no, and by no I mean as a director and a producer saying, no, we can't shoot 2 weeks earlier, no, we can't shoot those scenes before, no, we can't use your version of the script, is that no a trigger to Blake Lively in its unearthing other issues? I'm not a psychologist, but I have to tell you, it is something very much worth looking into, what caused this volcanic reaction and kind of made him the sworn enemy. Again, it might have nothing, we know this when it comes to issues with communication. A lot of times when there's limbic flares, and a lot of times when you have an issue where you explode and you're triggered, it's usually not about that person. It's about a deep-seated issue, which clearly exists somewhere here, whether with Blake Lively or Ryan Reynolds or both, maybe. So it's fascinating. Baldoni's lawyer speaks. No gag order as far as we know, but the judge is keeping a close eye. He'll tell you to knock it off if it goes too far. Looks to me as though Justin Baldoni's attorney won't be sharing any more information publicly. I think they appreciate that they've got the lawyer on their side, or the judge on their side. And I don't mean on their side, but I mean the sort of requests by Blake have been struck down, not having Friedman depose her and things like that. So I think they're going to enjoy kind of being in the good graces, should you say, of the judge. All right, that's it for me. I'm coming up with the Rush Hour podcast. You can scan that QR code if you need to listen on the audio. If you're driving home from work, we keep the podcast 25 to 30 minutes long. Perfect for your rush hour ride. So we'll see you then. Thank you guys so much. I'm Dave Neal. Have a good one.